Welcome guys. I'm just going to do a quick tutorial on how to play the campaign. So if you click new campaign, you choose your nation obviously. You can choose the year that you want to start in. It's in decades. I recommend starting at 1890, but you can start at later years if you want. Loading times are a lot better at 1890, so I'd definitely start there if I were you. Difficulty, that just changes the amount of money that the AI has, so it doesn't change anything else, just the amount of money, which means that they're going to have more ships basically, probably more research as well. The AI opponents, if you put it on random, then all of the AI and yourself, I believe, are all going to have random starting resources, GDP and growth. So the amount that you start of the GDP is going to be different, and the growth will fluctuate every 5 years. It'll go up until it reaches the maximum, and then it'll go down, and then it'll go up on a 5-year cycle. So you can start off with a bigger GDP but have a lower growth, or you can start off with a lower GDP and have a bigger growth, and you can have any variety of that. So you can end up with a situation where one nation's got the highest GDP and the highest growth, and also vice versa, the lowest GDP and the lowest growth. So with random, it is literally random. The other thing that it changes is when you go to war with people, different nations are going to be friendly with each other. And so if, say, Italy goes to war with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, then it will change relations with the other nations, Germany, France and Britain. And it's random who is friendly with who, basically. Where if you're on historical, then I think it's Britain and France versus the other three. Fleet generated, that's obviously if you want to create your own fleets at the beginning, or if you want the AI to create your fleets. If it's the first time that you're playing, you might want to do auto-generated, but you're always going to want to do create your own to have the best ships, basically. So always do this unless it's your very first playthrough, and then you might want to just let the AI take over so you can jump straight into playing immediately. Okay, so I've already got a campaign going, so I'll just load up the campaign. Right then, so we are the Germans. So the first thing you'll do when you start a new campaign is all your ships will be in port. So to be able to move them about, just click on your port, click on move ships, and then just click in any sea area. Right click on any sea area, and then you can move your ships. And then click move. Your ships will now create a task force or task fleet, and move to that sea area. Now you'll get a green circle around your task fleet. Now, I don't think this is quite implemented in the campaign yet, so really I'd just ignore the green bubbles at the moment. They're meant to be zones of influence. I'd imagine when it's fully implemented, you can like park this in a choke point, and then ships can't move through. But it doesn't actually work like that at the moment. You can guard a choke point, say here or here, and ships can just move straight through you and go into the Baltic. So just ignore the green circles for now. Okay, so with the task fleets, if you click on them, you can move them again, obviously. You've got this role which you can change. Now, I haven't actually messed about with these because they weren't working when I did mess about with them, and I've never felt the need to actually try them again since, because sea control works perfectly fine. So just leave your ships on sea control just for now, until later on when there's more development in the game and these might work properly. I don't think they really work properly at the moment, so just stick to sea control. Okay. Again, with the repair priority, I'm not 100% sure if this is working properly, so just leave that as it is. So really, the only thing you'll be doing on this screen is checking out your ships to see if any are damaged, and then maybe moving them back to port. Okay, so when you move your ships into a sea zone, they will create power projection. They actually create power projection when they're in the ports as well, but obviously if you want to create tensions and power projection in a sea zone that's not adjacent to your ports, then you will move your ships over to, say, here. When they reach here, they will add a power projection stat. You can see the power projection by hovering over the sea zone names. So that's the Western Mediterranean stats. So when you get there, you'll get a power projection number. Now, the power projection will do two things. One, it will increase tensions with the nations that have got ports in that sea zone. And two, if you're at war with a nation, the power projection will basically cause casualties to the enemy transports, which will reduce their economy. So the main thing though is building up tensions. The other thing it can do as well is if you create enough power projection in all of the sea zones around a nation, you can blockade them, but you need a significant amount of power projection to do that. I can't remember whether it's double or triple, but it's a lot anyway. Okay, so that is how you move your ships, create task fleets, and create tension. Now, if you create a task fleet, say of 112, when you've got a task fleet, that's how many ships are going to enter the battle. So you don't particularly want to create task fleets this big, because the game doesn't handle task fleets or battles larger than 100 very well. So assume that the enemy's going to have the same amount as you. So you don't really want to be going over 100. So if you're at 50, they're at 50, that's 100. So I'd stick to 50 or less, maximum. You might want to stick to 5 or 10 if you're just taking battleships. If you haven't got ships in a task fleet and they're just in port, then they create randomly generated missions if you're at war, and you can't control how many of your ships or which ships go into combat if they're in port. So to make sure that you get the correct ships and the correct amount of ships into combat, to always take them out of port and put them into task fleets, and then you know that you're guaranteed a specific complement going into the battle. Now if you did leave them in the port, you're going to have a couple of different sea roles. So with this task fleet that I sent out, the sea roles were sea control, invade and protect. Well, if you're in port, you have in being, which basically makes them cheaper to maintain, but you get less favourable random missions and you get less power projection. And you also have sea control, which is exactly the same as what it is in a task fleet. So you get more power projection, and you also get better odds in the randomly generated missions. You also have a third option when you're not at war, which is called limited, and I assume limited means it doesn't create. Well, then again, you can't create missions if you're not in war. So I think it just means that you have much less maintenance cost, basically, and you create the least amount of tension as well when you're unlimited. So if you don't want to create tension and you want to save cost, then put your ships on limited. Unfortunately, because I'm quite far through the game and there's loads of ships, the loading screens between tabs is really long. Right, so you've got unrest, which if it reaches 100, you lose the campaign. You've got naval prestige, where if that reaches minus 100, you lose the campaign. There isn't really many things that you can spend the naval prestige on, so I won't bother going into them. You basically, if you go bankrupt, you spend some of it to get a bailout. That's pretty much it at the moment. You can see, this is just a breakdown of your stats that you can see in more detail in these tabs. So you can see here I'm at war, and it shows you the victory points. You can see the monthly balance, which is how much money you can spend each month. Naval funds is your total amount, obviously. So let's go into the politics tab first. So here you've got your GDP, which is your country's gross domestic products, basically. And you will get a cut of that to spend on your finances. So the amount that you actually get is this naval budget percent. It's not actually the correct amount. If you divide your GDP by 13.3, you don't get the exact amount, but that's irrelevant. You get a cut of your GDP. You can increase your naval budget through events. That's the only way that you can increase it at the moment, so it's always a good thing to increase that. Your gross domestic product will fluctuate up and down. When I said at the start of the game, you get a growth stat. That will naturally grow and then decrease every 5 years on a cycle. When you're at war, though, it will decrease. For as long as you're at war, it'll keep decreasing. So it's a bad thing to be at war all the time because it damages your gross domestic product. So you end up with less money over time if you're always at war, basically. So here you can see all the different nations, how they're getting on. You can't do anything else on this screen, it's just literally to see the other countries' stats. So you can see the relations between you and the other countries here. So we are Germany. We can see that we've got plus 99 with the British, which means that we're at maximum relations, but we're not allied. If you ally with a nation, it goes to 100. You can't break alliances though, so if you ever want to go to war with a nation in the future, never ally with them. The opposite is minus 100, so if you're at minus 99, you're not at war, and then when you go to war, you go to minus 100. So to reduce these numbers, so say for example you want to go to war with Britain, to reduce the number you need to create tension with them. And to create tension with them, you need to move your ships into their sea zones. So you would create a task fleet and stick them by their ports, basically. Each sea zone will create tension, so if you want to create tension more quickly with another nation, you want ships in all of the different sea zones if you can. Now, each ship will create a different amount of tension, and the tension's based off the power projection. So to create tension, you need a ship which will create a lot of power projection. The bigger the ship, the more power projection it creates. So torpedo boats, which is what I've got here, don't create much tension at all, where battleships create a lot. To create the most amount of tension, then you're going to want a ship with high range stat, high draft and low beam. So when this actually loads up, I'll show you what I mean. Like I say, I'm quite far through the game at the moment, which is why all the loading times are ridiculously long. So this range slider here, this basically changes the amount of power projection that you create. It will affect tensions with other nations, and it also affects your random encounters, which is when your ships are in port. But that's all it does at the moment. When they develop the campaign a bit more, it will do other things, but for the time being, that's all it changes. So normally you just have it at lowest because it doesn't really do much at the moment. But if you want to create tension, I advise creating a specific ship to create tension, and then you don't really use it in combat, you only use it to create tension. So you'd want maximum beam, minimum draft, maximum range, minimum beam, and maximum draft, and that will give you the most power projection. So you might find that you stick all of your ships into a sea zone and it doesn't create tension with a nation. So say if you want to create tension with the British and it's not actually creating any, then it's likely that you haven't got enough power projection. And the reason being is if you've got positive relations with another country, so I'm at plus 99 with Britain at the moment, the more positive relations you've got with a country, the more power projection you need to reduce it. So when you're at like plus 99, you might require like 100 battleships or something stupid to be able to reduce it. You can also reduce it through events, but the major way that you reduce it is through power projection. Okay, so finances. Obviously, shipyard, you need to increase that to be able to build bigger ships. Your crew training, if you've got it set at 100, that will increase the training of your crew, and it also increases the amount of crew that you get each month. If you have it below 50, your crew will drop experience, and that includes the crew that are on your ships. So once you've reached trained, even if you don't want any more crew, it's good to keep it at 51 so the crew training level stays trained. If you drop it down to 0, that will drop from trained back down to cadets. So have it between 51 and 100. Your transport capacity. Now this is quite an important one. This affects your GDP if you're above 100. I think it also negatively affects it if you're below 100. So you always want this at maximum. Now when you lose transports at the end of each turn, that will drop this percentage down, each transport you lose. And then when you're below 100%, you get these transport losses penalty. And that penalty is permanent to your monthly balance until you go back above 100. And then when you go back above 100, this gradually starts to drop down to 0 again. So you always want to stay above 100 if you can. Just leave it at maximum. When it reaches 200%, it will default back to the middle. So just leave it at maximum until it reaches 200%. Your tech budget is pretty self-explanatory. The more money you spend on it, the more research you get. Not really anything else to explain there. With your research, you have these priorities. So if you don't set any priorities, then everything will just research at its natural rate. Where if you set a priority, say for example, that's at 7 months. So if we set a priority on boilers, that's just increased to 8 months. If we set another one on cruisers, that's just increased to 12 months. If we set another one on destroyers, that's just increased to 14. So each priority you put on will increase all of the others by a few months. And then if you set all 3, I think it doubles all of the others. So it increases the rate, the speed, or it decreases the speed of all of the others by twice as much if you've got all 3 priorities set. So it's not a good thing to actually spend priorities. You'd only do it if you specifically want something. So at the moment I want something in the boilers category, so I am going to prioritize this, but it does mean that I'm going to reduce the speed of everything else quite significantly. So use this sparingly. Ship design. Right, there's a few things in the ship design. So I'm going to create a new design. In fact, I'm not going to create a new design, that's a bit too obvious. What I'll do is I'll refit a ship, so I'll show you how to refit a ship. So we've got a light cruiser here. So if you click on the ship that you want to refit, click on view, Now you can click on this wrench icon. That will now let you edit the ship. So now you can edit anything you want on the ship. The only thing you can't edit is the displacement, so you can't increase the size of the ship, but you can even increase the beam, which is a bit strange. You would have thought that they would be locked as well, but they aren't. So you change whatever you want on your ship, then click Save Design, then click Exit. Unfortunately, the loading times are insane at the moment. If you start in 1890 and you haven't got many ships built or anything, then the loading times are significantly faster. Okay, so you can now click on the ship that you've just saved, click Refit Ship. Any ships that are in port and not damaged, you can now refit. So you can click on each one, or you can hold down Control and select multiple, or you can click on the top one, hold down Shift and select all of them. So then you would press proceed and all of your ships will now refit. Now there is a bug at the moment where sometimes they can refit if you're at sea, but sometimes it doesn't work, and if you try and refit them at sea, they won't enter any battles, so I recommend bringing them back to port before you actually do that. So I wouldn't do this if you're in a war, because you can end up basically in a war with all your ships out of commission. Now from here, you can't build refitted ships, but you can go into View, and then you can copy the refitted design. So let's assume this is a new design. We've just refitted it, but we want to build more, but we can't. So just go into copy. You can now save the copy, and now you can build that design. So that is how you build a refitted ship. You have to copy it and build it. Okay, so now you can click on it, and now you can build it. So you can now delete designs, but be careful, you can delete a design that you don't want to delete, so be very careful when using this button. So I don't want to delete this one because I've got ships that are this, and I might want to refit them. So I don't want to delete that design. So you've got to be really careful when using the delete button. So that one and this one are the two new ones that I'm not actually using, so I'm going to delete them, but just be very careful. So here on the fleet tab, you can mothball ships. So if you're not using a ship, these are my power projection ships. I don't want to use them in combat. So if you've got ships that you don't want to use in combat, you can mothball them. Now, unfortunately, you can't just click on a C roll or you can't mothball them quickly. You've got to actually mothball each individual one. So you have to set its crew to minimum to mothball the ship. So that will save you significant money mothballing a ship, so it's always a good thing to do. It actually looks like these ships are in sea control, even though they're mothballed, and they're costing me more money than the ships that are in being, which is rather amusing. So yeah, that's a bit of a bug. So yeah, as you change your C rolls, you can see the change in the maintenance cost here. As you take casualties in battle, you're going to want to refill your crew. So you're going to want to check this add crew, which will automatically add crew. And that's about it, really. You can obviously scrap ships, you can suspend ships that you're building, so if you've set too many ships to build and you're running out of cash, you can just suspend them all and then start them again. And I can't think of anything else that's really important to mention, to be honest. I haven't made any list or anything on what to go through, but I think I've covered pretty much everything. If you've got any specific questions, then just drop a comment and I'll reply. So yeah, I think that's about it. If you want to go to war with a country, surround their ports with ships to build up power projection. That's about all there is to it, I reckon. Alright, cheers. Well, thanks for watching. Hope this has been helpful. Take care, and I'll see you soon.